Hello, my name is Sherrina Sewell. I'm the Unit Supervisor in the Chesterfield DARS office.
Hello, I am Dawn Mosley, one of the transition counselors, also in the Chesterfield DARS office.
And today we're going to be presenting a webinar on family engagement in the transition process, specifically vocational rehabilitation and employment. The first thing that we want to talk to you all about is how do you connect to vocational rehabilitation? I'll be using the term VR going forward to refer to vocational rehabilitation. So it all starts with information and referral. Typically, when working with schools, anyone can make a referral for VR services. It can come from the student themselves, it can come from the transition coordinator, a case manager, family member, therapist, medical provider. When working with students who are in school, we typically get this information from the school directly. It's the DRS counselor's responsibility to attend family meetings and to make presentations to the school and families to give them information about the services VR can provide to their students before graduation as well as after graduation. Ideally, we would like to receive referrals for VR services around the age of 14. 14 or 15 is best, and that's typically around the 9th or 10th grade. And the reason for that is so that true transition can take place and appropriate services can be provided in the maximum amount of time. We are in Virginia. At the end of this presentation, you will see how to contact your local VR office, but if you are outside of Virginia, then you would have to contact your own VR office.
So once the referral is done, your next step is to have an intake meeting. And there is certain documentation that is needed for you to bring to your intake meeting. The first thing would be a school referral. And this is usually done at the student's IEP meeting, where your case manager will discuss with you VR services and have you sign a release to speak with us. The next thing would be a picture ID, which is state issued, if they have one. If not, it's okay. And then your social security number and or card. It would be best if you were able to provide the card, but as long as you know your social security number. We do ask for financial documents, and that would be if your student is receiving any type of social security benefits, or if they're not receiving social security benefits, if they are carried on the household's tax income, then a copy of that previous year's tax returns. The key participants to be at this intake meeting would be the student, which would be best practice for the student to be there, the parent and or guardian, your school case manager and teachers, and then any other community supports, like if your student is receiving services from a community services board or any type of advocate or maybe a waiver case manager. Also, other information that could be good to bring to the meeting would be if your student is receiving any other types of services or service providers, like they're being followed by a psychiatrist, to have that contact information with their name and number. And at this meeting is used to get to know you and your student, what their interests are, and also other information to help us move forward with planning services for them after high school.
Now that we've discussed the intake process, I'm going to talk to you about what's next regarding VR. So we ask that people come into the intake process with documentation so that we're able to find them eligible for services. Vocational rehabilitation is an eligibility program, not an entitlement program that most people are used to through their schools. Some of the documentation we use would be a psychological, sociological, IEP, medical information, and mental health documentation. And that information can be given from anyone on the support team that's there to help the student. Anyone that is a United States citizen is also eligible for services, and we have to have proof that someone has a limitation in their activities of daily living. Those people that receive benefits from the Social Security Administration are automatically presumed eligible for our services as well. Once we go over this paperwork and determine that someone is eligible for services, they will be placed in a category 1 through 4 based on order of selection. Within our agency, we operate under order of selection, and at that time, someone will either go into a delayed status or a wait list, or they will receive services immediately. Either way, the VR counselor will maintain communication with the student and their families to let them know when they're able to have their case fully active and open. Once they are off the delayed status, a letter will be given to the student and their family, as well as a phone call, and from there, services would begin.
So once your case is fully active and open with VR, that's when we begin the transition planning process. So we're going to talk about some things that we would do with you before graduation. The first thing would be the individualized education plan meetings, or your IEP meetings. And your VR counselor would attend these meetings so that we can be on the same page of activities that are going on, your plan going through high school, and then any other vocational activities that you are participating through with your high school. And we would love for the families to, be in these meetings or the full support team so that we can all discuss plans moving forward and all know what the plan moving forward is. We also start the career exploration process at this time to begin the student thinking about what it is they'd like to do after high school. There are some students who will come into VR and have a very strong idea of what it is they would like to do after high school. And then there are others that look at us and say, I don't know, which is okay. That's the point of career exploration, to start looking at who do you know and what do they do, and are you interested in what they do, and what are your strengths and what are your weaknesses, and how can we match that up with different types of jobs. We also can look at doing vocational evaluations, which are more paper pencil tests that look at interest inventories to kind of figure out what you could be matched up to in regards to working. Community living exploration, we know most students after high school want to continue to live with their families, but there are some that would like to explore independent or maybe even semi-independent living situations and branch out on building their level of independence. Community-based instruction is more so some of the internships that your student would do within their school system, where they would actually go out into the community to an employer and actually be able to work for a couple of hours and actually experience what it's like to be at a job. Project Search is one of the programs where you can do internships at a work site, and it runs for the entire school year, where the student would be able to do 3 internships and then also have some classroom time where they work on soft skills and what's expected of them of an employer. VR training centers are another way of gaining some training and experience on different jobs and learning how to do those jobs and getting some certifications for those jobs. Situational assessments are more of a short-term experience in working, where you're actually going to go out into an employment setting and actually do the job for maybe a couple of hours, but it gives you the opportunity to see, is this something that I really like to do, or is this something that I thought I would like to do, but maybe I might not be interested in it. And then assistive technology is more of a support for the student in working to actually come up with ways to help the student on the job if they need some type of assistance to maybe transition from one task to another, or maybe that student might need some type of communication device to better communicate with their coworkers and their natural supports.
So we talked a little bit about transition planning before graduation, and I'm going to touch on after graduation. But keep in mind that some of these services and some of these things that we're talking about, they can take place before graduation or after graduation. Many of these services that we're discussing are very much individualized to where the student is within their school system and just within their own area and what they're ready and prepared to do. So we talked about the IEP, which is on the school side, and I'm going to talk a little bit about the Individualized Plan for Employment, or IPE, and that is a vocational rehabilitation term. But the point of us gathering all of that information that was just discussed and learning about a student's strengths and their weaknesses and what they like to do and what type of support they're going to need and what type of assistive technology they're going to need is so that we can develop a solid plan for employment. When we develop this plan, which is a document, we hope that families are there to help support students. The student has to be there because it is all about them, but we do hope that the team is there to support them in their decisions. That would include family members, the transition coordinator, and the DRS counselor. During the meeting, we're going to be talking about what the student wants to do and what support they're going to need to get there. We're also going to be talking about VR's responsibility and their role, as well as the student's responsibility going forward. One of the most important things we talk about would be their vocational goal and how to set goals when developing their IPE. So we talk a lot about short-term goals versus long-term goals. We provide guidance and counseling to students to say, do you want to go back to school after high school? Do you want to go to college? Do you need to go into a training program, or do you just want to work? And where do you see yourself right after you graduate versus where do you see yourself 5 years from now? So those are the types of discussions that we have with our students and with their families while we're planning everything for them. We also talk about support needs because it's very important that our students know that when working with VR, the supports they receive, they're going to look a little bit different compared to when they were in high school, but they will still have supports. On the employment plan, besides guidance and counseling, other supports that we discuss with the people we work with include benefits planning and counseling. Many of the people we work with receive services through Social Security Administration, so we want to make sure that they understand and are comfortable with knowing how work will or will not affect their benefits, and that because they're students, they can also take advantage of many incentive programs geared toward them. So we take a lot of time going over this with students and their families. We make sure they're involved working with work incentive specialists so that they understand all of those things. Also, in regards to support needs, we want our students and their families to understand that there are different types of supports. There are supports that they'll receive on the job, and there are supports that they're going to need to receive at home, and they both go hand in hand. So while they're on the job, we want to make sure that they understand that they may have a natural support in their coworkers or their manager. Some people may work with a job coach in supported employment where they're receiving extra help and support to learn their job and maintain interpersonal skills. But at home, we also want families to know that a student is going to need support as well. Going from school to work is a very big change, and a lot of students may not have the stamina or the tolerance to work a full day. They may not be used to clocking in on time or working with other people. So we do expect and hope that families are involved in making sure that they're talking with their students, obtaining feedback, and just staying involved while they're working. Another thing that we discuss that's very important in reference to transition planning is financial resource planning. And this is one of those things that we discuss before graduation and again after graduation because most VR services are at no cost, but there are services in which there are cost services. For example, if someone decides that they want to go to college after high school, they may want to inquire how VR can help in financial planning for college. Some people may need vehicle or home modifications, supported employment in which they're working with a job coach, and assistive technology are all examples of cost services. So before we start to delve into all of the services we're going to provide and how we're moving forward, we have to decide who's paying for what.
Okay, so once we've developed the IPE and we have a goal in mind of what the student is looking for, then we actually start looking for the job. So involvement in the job search is very important for the students to stay engaged, but also for their family and their support systems to stay engaged in the job search as well. And we can do that in a couple ways. So when your VR counselor is providing you with job leads, or the support staff in your local office is providing job leads for you, to making sure that you're letting them know that you're seeing those job leads, letting them know of whether or not you're interested in some of the job leads that they've sent you, and then also networking. Networking is a very big part of finding a job. A lot of times finding a job is all in who you know. So networking in your peer group, your family's networking with who they know and seeing, who out there might be hiring, and if it's something that would be appropriate for that student. Follow up, making sure that you're following up on applications that you're putting in, and following up with your VR counselor with letting them know what you've applied for, when you applied for that job. And with job applications, knowing that we don't expect every student or every person that we work with to be able to complete every job application or even complete the job applications on their own. Knowing that we're here to help them with those job applications and also to review the job applications to make sure that they are complete and to make sure that the information on there is thorough and correct. Communication is a very big piece in the VR process. If we are unable to reach the consumer or the student, it makes it very hard for us to help them. So making sure that you stay in communication with your VR counselor. We all know that finding a job is not a quick process. It can take some time. But making sure to stay engaged and communicating can help your VR counselor know what's going on. And then also letting them know of changes in your situation. So maybe you've changed your job goal. Maybe you've decided what you started out looking for is not going to be the best match for you. Or maybe you've moved, or maybe you've changed your phone number, which is a very big thing. If we can't reach you by phone, then an employer cannot reach you by phone, and you're going to miss out on opportunities. Also, setting parameters. Parameters are going to help us make sure that we are looking for the appropriate job for you. Maybe with the correct hours. Maybe there's certain hours you can't work, or maybe your family is not willing to transport outside of a certain distance, or there's a specific geographical location that you would prefer to work in. Or maybe even talking with you about what type of wage you're looking for in working, and making sure that we have all that information so that we're not sending you job leads that don't match what you're looking for and wasting time on leads that aren't going to prove to be good for you or prove to be something that's going to be the best match for you.
So, as students leaving high school and looking for work, there are a lot of fears and myths regarding employment. There's fears on both the student side and family side. So I just want to address some of those common fears and myths that we hear. A lot of people think that my son or my daughter, they can't work. And we're here to tell you that more than likely they can work. And we believe that everyone should have the opportunity to try work. And we also understand that some people want to work and are capable of working a full-time job. But there are some people who only want to work a part-time job or due to needing to build up their tolerance should only work a part-time job. And these are things that a VR counselor will discuss with students and families to make sure that when it's time for them to seek employment, that they are comfortable with seeking part-time or full-time work. One of the things that people are also fearful of would be losing their benefits through the Social Security Administration. This is one of the reasons why we have people work with one of our work incentive specialists, as we mentioned earlier, so that they understand that working will either help them put more money in their pockets or it will help them all around and just becoming much more independent. We want people to understand that working in no way would decrease their lifestyle that they're already accustomed to have. And if anything, it's going to increase it. Because students are students, they're used to having long vacations in the summer. They're used to going anywhere they want on weekends with their friends and family. And so we do a lot of guidance and counseling regarding when you're working, what it means to request time off properly, what it means to have to work on weekends, and usually only having 1 week of vacation. So we do a lot of that, and we let people understand that you can work and still have fun too. You can still spend time with your family. And the nice thing is now you're being paid, so you have more spending money. There are also a lot of fears and myths regarding what someone's going to be paid when they're working. I've worked with young people who just graduated from high school, and they tell me, look, if I'm going to work, I need to make $100,000 when I graduate from high school. And I would love to make $100,000 now. But we talk realistically to students about how their education, their work experience, their volunteer experience equates to the types of jobs that they would have and the earnings that they will receive so that they understand and they know what to expect regarding earnings. And we talk a lot about minimum wage versus earning much more money than that. We also talk about entry-level positions versus higher level careers, which is why we talked earlier about discussing short-term versus long-term goals and what's more important to a person. We don't want to just put someone in any job. This is very much individualized, and we really want to know where someone sees themselves in the future and how we can get there. In regards to job loss, there are people who are fearful of getting a job because they've lost jobs in the past and it was an unpleasant experience. So we talked to a lot of people about how to handle job loss and how you move on from job loss. But also, if we do find a job for someone and it's not the right fit, we talk to students and their families about proper ways to put in a 2-week notice with their employer and seek out other employment. One of the myths we hear all the time in VR is that we have business relationships in our back pocket, and people just expect us to pull out that index card and say, here's your job, go get it. And while that would be lovely, we don't have that type of relationship with businesses. We do rely on networking, we rely on previous relationships, and we build relationships and rapport with businesses so that it makes it easier for people with disabilities to find employment. But just like anyone else, we do have to apply, interview, and again, it's based on the best candidate at the time. So we don't have businesses in our back pocket, and together as a team, which includes student, families, anyone else they may know, we work together to try to find employment for someone. And the last fear that I'm going to discuss is students feel like they won't have any support once they're working. Again, going from high school, where there was a great deal of support in place through teachers and guidance counselors, they feel that they may not have support when they go to work, and it's scary. But there is a lot of support. They work with a DRS counselor, a VR counselor. Some people have family support that's incredible, which is why we rely on parents and guardians and friends just to be involved as much as possible. But there's also support while they're at work. They build a rapport with their coworkers and they become friends with them, and they build a rapport with their managers who are there to support them. So we always let people know that once they get a job, that's just the beginning of support. It's a different type of support, but they won't be left alone.
So employment logistics is the next thing that I'm going to talk about. So making sure that we have some type of plan set in place in regards to employment. So the biggest thing is transportation. If you get a job, how are you going to get there? So does your student have a driver's license? Do they have a car? Can I take the bus? So we want to make sure that this conversation has been had between the student and their families to figure out what the plan is going to be in order for them to get to work. And that's one of the reasons why we talked about the parameters and setting distance in regards to employment, because transportation is going to play a factor. You also have to look at whether you live in a rural area where there's not going to be a transit system, or whether you live in a city area or suburban setting where there's going to be more options for transportation. And then going hand in hand with transportation is hours. What type of hours are you looking to work? Are you a morning person? Are you a night owl and you can stay up all night long so you don't mind working the night shift? But in looking at those two together, maybe you're in an area where there is a transportation system, but there's limited hours on that transportation system. And maybe they stop running at 9 o'clock. So you have to be off by 8:30 to be able to catch that last route of that transportation to be able to get home from work. You might not have another option to get you home. So transportation hours are two big things to have conversations with the student and with their family support system in regards to what's going to work for that student and looking for employment. Benefits. We've talked about Social Security benefits and making sure that the student and the families understand how working is going to affect that check coming in every month, whether it's going to go up and down, but also making sure that the income that's now coming into the house is going to be reported to the Social Security Administration. The other side of benefits is, in looking for a job, whether we're looking for a part-time or full-time, is, are we looking for a job that's offering any type of medical insurance? Maybe the student is due to come off the parent's insurance, or maybe the student does not have Medicaid benefits. So is that student looking for some type of insurance benefits through that job? That can play a big role in what type of jobs you're looking for and what type of jobs you're willing to accept. Supports. So what type of supports is the student going to need? Your supports can look very different depending on where you are in the job. When you start a job, or when a student starts a job, they're going in very new. They don't know what they're going to do. So they might need a lot of supports in the beginning to learn that job and start to feel comfortable, versus they might be a month and a half or 2 months into the job and they've started to become more comfortable. And if they're receiving some type of supported employment services, their job coach can now start to fade out and not have to be there as often. But at the same time, it's also okay that in that middle section, if something comes up, to be able to build that support back up if it needs to come back up. And then at the end, of course, we would like to see the student being very comfortable and very independent and being able to handle their job. But at the same time, we want to make sure that the student and the families have some type of contingency plan, that if something comes up, the student knows how to handle that and what point of contact they have to be able to reach out to be able to get some help. Another thing to look at when it comes to employment is the transfer of responsibility. Working and now going into the transition from school to employment, the responsibilities become very different. We're looking more so at the student to become more independent and to grow in their independence. And when you're working, you don't want your mom or your guardian contacting your employer and communicating with your employer for you. You want to be able to handle that situation on your own. On the job, when you're dealing with your supervisors, making sure that you can handle that situation on your own to be able to maybe request a day off, or maybe your time sheet is not matching up with your paycheck, to be able to understand what you need to do to fix that. And it's okay if the student starting off is unable to handle that independently. Maybe they might need some coaching from their job coach, or maybe to be able to role play at home with a family member or part of their support system. But starting that process to get them to actually understand that the responsibility now becomes their own, as they are now an employee and they're not a student in school anymore.
In reference to continued support, once someone is working, I'd like to take just a few minutes to talk about some of the different terminology that you might hear when working in VR. The first term I'm going to talk about is closure. So when people work with a VR counselor, they don't work with them forever, which is a good thing. But there is it is a time limited service. And typically there are about 3 reasons why a case would be closed. And one would be if someone says, I really don't need your services anymore. I think I'm doing okay. I don't really need help, or I'm just not ready to work. And in that case, they may ask us to close their case, and we would. There may be times when someone has moved and we're unable to reach them. We lost contact with them, and in that case, VR may decide to close a case. But the best closure is when we've worked with a student through high school, we worked with them through graduation and after high school. They were able to find a job, they're doing well, they feel comfortable. About 90 days has passed, and then we talk to the students, we talk to their families and say, hey, you're doing great. It's time for us to close your case. We want everyone we work with to be able to be as independent as possible. So when someone has reached that point, VR will go ahead and close their case. However, there are times when some things come up and they may call VR again and say, hey, there's something going on. I really need extra assistance. So we also offer other services such as follow-along. For those people who are working with a job coach in supported employment, they will receive follow-along services, which means as long as they are working in that specific job, a job coach will be there with them to check on them, maybe once or twice a month. It may be a simple phone call. It may be a quick face-to-face appointment, but they're there just to make sure everything is still okay. And the nice thing about having that job coach and follow-along services is that if there are things that are really going wrong, or if you need to learn something new or spend more time with the job coach at work, then the job coach is there as your extra support, and they are also able to contact your VR counselor again. There are some people who receive what's called post-employment services, and typically people may receive post-employment services if they were working and they received a promotion, so their duties have changed or increased, or if they ran into any issues on the job. Let's say they started working with a new manager and it's not going well. Or perhaps there was something going on, there was a crisis either at work or at home. Um, it could have been something simple where they ran out of medication, so there were some changes that people saw in the workplace. But no matter what it is, they may need to take advantage of post-employment services. When someone is in post-employment services, the VR counselor will reopen the case temporarily. It is a short-lived services, but they will reopen the case long enough to get the person working back on track and provide those additional services that they need. If we find that post-employment services are not enough in supporting an individual and getting them back on track, we as a team may need to decide if we should reopen the case fully. And at that point, the person would go through having an intake and eligibility once again. One of the things that VR will also provide to people before they close their case would be any information and referral to other community resources. And that may include independent living services. It may include information to social services. If people one day decide they want to learn how to drive, it may include services regarding that. It could be anything that they need. It may include services at the Community Services Board. But before their case is closed, VR is going to make sure that they have that information for further use. And the other thing we also want people to know all the time is that job loss is a natural occurrence. Most people in their lifetime have lost a job or two. And it's not that someone has lost a job, but we talk to people about what you've learned from the job. What can you take away from that experience? And how can you use it going forward when you find another job? And that's why we're here to support all the individuals we work with and their families.
We hope this webinar has been very informative for you and you've gained knowledge in regards to family engagement and the vocational rehabilitation process. We have here listed the contact information for the Virginia Department for Aging and Rehabilitative Services. But remember, if you're not in Virginia, please look up the information for your local vocational rehabilitation program.